For decades, the existence of extraterrestrial life has been one of humanity's greatest mysteries. But now, a veil of secrecy has finally been lifted as classified documents and testimonies detail countless close encounters. From mind-bending accounts by military personnel to stunning footage defying explanation, we're exploring some of the most credible and disturbing alien sightings ever documented. Prepare to have your perception of reality permanently altered as you witness events that will make you question everything about our universe.
Starting off our list today, we have a 2018 UFO sighting that took place in the skies above North Carolina. Shout out to anyone watching from Elon University. In August of 2018, a man named Javion Hill claims to have spotted a UFO while driving home on US 74 just southwest of Charlotte. He described seeing lights in the clouds above him, shaped like a square. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and began snapping photos, which I have to admit are pretty convincing. After hovering in the sky above Javion for a good amount of time, the illuminated formation just vanished into thin air, as they do. You know how it is. It was as though it had never existed in the first place, but of course it did because there's proof, and we've seen it. And Hill, who says he was never a believer in aliens before that night, claims that during the time in which the object was hovering above him, he was seriously concerned for his safety.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, saw something in the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington, something that he couldn't quite explain. He described 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation. What really caught his attention was how fast these things were moving, at around 1,700 miles per hour, which was faster than any known aircraft at the time. And when Arnold reported what he saw, it ended up getting massive media coverage. The Kenneth Arnold sighting is often referenced as the first big UFO encounter in modern times. After Arnold's sighting, lots of other reports started coming in about strange things in the sky across the United States. The government and military were getting intrigued, and the US Air Force started Project Sign, which was the first official government investigation into UFOs. This later became Project Blue Book, which looked into thousands of UFO sightings to try and figure out what was going on. So is it just one of these cases where he saw something and then everybody else started like getting excited and, just thought they were seeing things? Or was this just the time where UFOs and aliens were starting to come down to investigate things here on Earth?
Next up, we have 2 commercial pilots on different aircrafts claiming to have seen a mysterious flying object in the sky while flying above Arizona on February 24th of 2018. The first pilot to spot the UFO called into radio traffic control to ask if another plane had passed by him. The controller answered no, and then went on to make a joke about the pilot having possibly seen a UFO. Ground control then contacted another pilot flying an American Airlines flight a little bit behind the first plane and asked the pilot to inform the control center if an aircraft were to pass over the plane. And a short while later, the pilot did exactly that. He said that a fast object had flown 3,000 feet over his plane in the opposite direction of which he was going. Once again, ground control had no knowledge of the aircraft, and it didn't show up on any of the radars either. Both pilots later described the objects as illuminated and incredibly fast, saying that they were nothing like the weather balloons they had seen sometimes floating at that altitude before. Plus, there were no records of this object, so what could it have been? Well, a UFO, duh.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was the lead investigator of Project Blue Book in the 50s. His job was to investigate reports of UFOs and find any possible explanation for them. Of course, if there was none, it would be categorized as a genuine UFO. French had shot down a lot of UFO reports over the course of his career, but in 1952, he witnessed something himself, something he could only describe as a genuine alien encounter. He kept what he'd seen a secret for decades. It wasn't until 2013 that he testified before 6 former members of Congress in DC, describing an event that happened back in 1952. A number of residents off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, had reported spotting 2 unidentified flying objects. So French was tasked with heading over to Canada to basically debunk it. The UFOs had crashed into the water, and when Lieutenant Colonel French arrived, he saw this crowd of about 100 people, including some police, standing by a wharf, gawking at something in the water. French made his way over, and when he looked down into the clear water below, he saw what looked like two large circular aircraft-like objects, and there were apparently two beings working on them. French described the creatures as, quote, 2 to 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers, the top of their heads much wider than their jawline. Their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. He then described the objects slowly rising out from the water before abruptly accelerating and taking off into the sky.
Next up, we have the very first record of a UFO encounter to take place in New England, USA, which I bet you didn't know was actually a major hotspot for extraterrestrial UFO and UAP activity. That's unidentified aerial phenomena, for those of you who don't know. The first recorded sighting happened in Boston, New England, and it was also the first ever documented sighting in the US as a whole. It took place in 1639, and credible reports have been popping up ever since. The record was a second-hand observation recorded by colony founder and governor at the time, John Winthrop, who wrote that a sober, discreet man had seen the sky above Boston become illuminated by a green light while he was rowing his boat along the river one evening. The light was still for a moment and appeared to be flaming, and then it morphed its shape and darted off into the night sky towards Charlestown. The encounter lasted for 3 hours, with the object in the sky going higher into the air and then rushing down closer to Earth again and again, back and forth. By the time it ended, which it did when the object just disappeared into the night, the man along with his boatmates had traveled 1 mile upstream with absolutely no memory of how they had gotten there.
This next one has to be the wildest alien encounter case in recent history. So in March of 2023, something strange went down in a small Bolivian village called Horania. It all started with reports of a mysterious green light hovering in the sky. People whipped out their phones to capture the event, having no idea what the hell they were looking at. But unlike a lot of your typical UFO cases, this one doesn't just end with people seeing something strange in the sky. Things get way weirder. So 2 days later, residents claimed to have seen tiny beings darting around the town at night. One villager, Rita Marquez, described them as little and almost like goblins. Some locals even claimed to have found one of these small creatures dead in a gutter one morning, only for its body to vanish soon after. So, a lot to unpack here. Strange lights, possible aircraft, little beings running around the streets at night, and even a mysterious disappearance of one of these dead creatures. I don't know what to make of this case. Whenever there's a whole bunch of witnesses like this, I find it very interesting though.
Next up, we have Barney and Betty Hill's extraterrestrial encounter, which took place on September 19th of 1961 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the couple claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The ordeal started when the pair saw a bright light in the sky around 10:30 p.m. while driving home after a night out. Betty asked Barney to stop the car so that they could get a better look. He did, and then pulled out a pair of binoculars. What they saw was a massive, oddly shaped spacecraft with multicolored lights. They tried to drive away, but the spaceship, which they believed to have been at least 40 feet long, followed them, getting closer and closer until it was hovering directly in front of the pair's car. Barney claims he was able to clearly make out 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship who instructed Barney and Betty not to move, but rather to just keep looking towards the ship. The next thing the pair remembered, they had driven 35 miles away from their destination with no recollection of doing so. They tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on their way home, but their memories quickly became fragmented. It wasn't until years later, under hypnosis, that the pair separately both recalled being taken onto the ship and then separated from one another and examined by the humanoid alien life forms. In the days after the incident, however, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny, circles on the back of his truck, and when he put his compass near them, it went haywire. So, I'm not saying they were telling the truth, but I think they might have been telling the truth.
This next story is very outlandish, but it's an entertaining story, and I haven't talked about it before, so Here it goes. Back in 2021, Angelina Lynn Johnston held a news conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Johnston claims to be a former retired defense intelligence officer who had an encounter with various alien species at a secret base in the Mojave Desert. She claimed that in January of 2010, a few years before she ran as a Democrat candidate for South Dakota Senate, she had met up with a couple in South Carolina who ended up taking her to this secret base. She didn't provide details on exactly where the base was in the desert, but said that she would be taking an astronaut along with a few scientists to the base, which had been built into the side of a mountain. She described seeing various alien species, including one that looked a bit like a praying mantis type creature, and that the beings all spoke to her through telepathy.
Next up, we have the Exeter incident, which took place in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1965 and actually inspired a best-selling novel, Incident at Exeter: Unidentified Flying Objects Over America Now, by John G. Fuller. Not sponsored. One evening in Exeter, a police officer patrolling Highway Route 101 stopped to check on a woman parked on the side of the road. When he asked her what was wrong, she answered in breathless hysterics. She claimed that a large red flying object with flashing lights had been chasing her. Just a few hours later, the police heard a similar story from another man, a hitchhiker who claimed to have seen 5 bright lights in the sky while walking along Route 150. He told officers that they had been about 100 feet away from where he had stood, and he watched as they hovered over a home before moving over to the airspace above a large field, and then disappearing and reappearing several times. Curious, one of the policemen went with the hitchhiker back to the spot where he claimed to have seen the UFOs, and sure enough, there it was. And another officer arrived shortly after to see the exact same thing: 5 bright lights high up in the sky disappearing into and reappearing from the trees over and over again. And then, over the next few weeks, authorities in Exeter received almost 60 other reports of UFO sightings in the area. So, if you like aliens and UFOs and Exeter was not on your bucket list, you might want to rethink that decision.
Finally, we have a case where 3 UFOs hijacked a pilot's plane in midair. This is about as disturbing a close encounter as it gets, as this man just narrowly escaped death. The pilot's name is Carlos de los Santos. In 1975, he'd been flying back to Mexico City. It was just another routine flight until it wasn't. Carlos spotted something on his right wing. It was this silver disc-like object about 13 feet in length. It was just right on top of the wing. Then he saw an identical object on top of his left wing. And as if that wasn't enough, a third object appeared, and this one was heading straight for him. In a panic, Carlos tried to steer his plane away, but the controls weren't responding. Luckily, the object just missed him though. He frantically radioed air traffic control, explaining that he'd lost control and was surrounded by these strange disc objects. And then, to his complete and utter horror, the plane suddenly veered completely off course. It was now ascending higher and higher up into the sky. Carlos had absolutely no control over the plane now. But then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the strange objects flew away. And miraculously, thankfully, Carlos regained control of the aircraft.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have exoplanets. One of the first things spoken about in the 12-minute long anonymous video is that around 25 years ago, we didn't know that planets existed outside of our solar system. While that seems hard to believe, that is actually basically true, keeping in mind that this video was released in 2017. The first exoplanets, which are what planets outside of our solar system are called, were discovered in 1992, which is super recently. The video then goes on to explain that today we have found over 3,400 exoplanets that orbit other suns. This may seem redundant or unimportant, but this is a really important part of our search for alien life. With the vastness of space, there are so many places that need to be searched, so we have to find some place to start, and these planets are the perfect place. It is entirely possible that alien life may thrive off of entirely different things than life as we know it. The things we need to survive might be detrimental to alien life, But how are we supposed to know that when we don't know any aliens? This is why we started our search by looking for places with conditions similar to Earth, which we now call habitable planets. Part of a habitable planet's requirements is that they are orbiting a star, but that they aren't too close or too far from it like we are with the sun. So what the video is trying to get across is that while 25 years ago we didn't know any, we now know of thousands of planets that might be holding some kind of alien life. While we haven't found the proof yet, we at least have a pretty stellar starting point. In our number 9 spot today we have Dr. Brian O'Leary. One thing Anonymous mentioned in the video was an apparent quote from Dr. Brian O'Leary, who's a former NASA astronaut and Princeton physics professor. The video stated that he said that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been monitoring us for a very long time, and that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional materialistic Western point of view, and that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use droids, they use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems, which seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. I obviously have no idea how I could possibly substantiate these claims, but they certainly are interesting regardless of what you personally believe. This could of course just be nonsense in order to stir up the masses, but it could also be someone who's finally telling us the truth, but we're all just too skeptical at this point to believe it. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of what Dr. O'Leary said. Do you think it's a hunk of baloney, or do you think that he just might be telling the truth? In our number 8 spot today we have the FBI documents. Around the halfway mark, the person in the anonymous video begins to discuss some sort of FBI documents that are apparently unclassified just sitting there on the website. The video claims that the documents suggest that we've not only been visited by aliens from space, but also beings from other dimensions. The video does explain that the document didn't originate from within the FBI, but rather from a university department head, but that the FBI treated the document with the utmost importance, which is certainly interesting. It's also very important to note, however, that this document was sent in 1947. I'm not sure if that makes the claims more or less likely or credible, but the timing of it definitely seems important, at least to me. While this is one of those things that you have to draw your own conclusions from, in the video it is mentioned that while we are arguing whether or not supposed UFO or alien sightings have really taken place here on Earth or in space, there are real instances of extraterrestrial beings visiting us, but we're just too focused on the debate to open our eyes and see for ourselves. In our number 7 spot today we have esoteric matters. After the discussion of the FBI documents, there is a claim that these beings that have apparently been visiting us are coming not from a planet as we think of it, but rather some sort of etheric planet that interpenetrates with our own, but that we are unable to perceive. Apparently, if you're a student of esoteric matters, these concepts will make a lot more sense to you, or so this anonymous video claims. Apparently, these alien beings are able to make a conscious decision to enter our plane, and in that same respect, they're also to make a decision to disappear from our view. Apparently, they're visiting us as they are thinking about settling here on our plane, and that they are coming here peacefully. During these visits, they are also said to have technology that would destroy any sort of attack made on them, so it is advised that if they do make themselves visible to us, we do not attack or make them feel threatened. I'm not so sure about this one, but at the end of the day, I am certainly no student of esoteric matters, so maybe it's just something that my brain cannot comprehend with the knowledge I currently have. In our number 6 spot today we have this UFO footage. This UFO footage is coming from another anonymous video which claims that real UFO footage is always censored, and that this video has been previously censored, but they were here to expose the truth. It is unclear where this UFO video was taken, and at the end of the day, I'm no expert in debunking these things, so it's tough to say whether or not it's real, but let's all just take a look and you can judge for yourselves. I know that wasn't the most exciting video, but what do we think aliens are going to be doing if they really are visiting us? What do you guys think? Do you guys think that this video is really showing some sort of UFO? And if you do you think it's aliens or just some sort of secret project that we aren't privy to? In our number 5 spot today we have Perseverance. A point that was made in the video is something that we are actually now watching happen in real time, and that is the mission to Mars for the Perseverance rover that is currently there digging around in the soil. The video stated that Mars may hold signs of an ancient environment that may have been favorable to microbial life. Well, that is exactly true, and the reason the rover is there at all. The Perseverance rover launched from Earth on July 30th, 2020 and made an incredible and successful landing on Mars on February 18th, 2021. While the rover has provided us with some incredible high-definition photos of the red planet, which truly are incredible to look at, its main objective is to dig around and search for ancient signs of life, collecting rock and soil samples for a possible return to Earth for further research. While Mars' thin atmosphere is unable to shield the planet from the high amounts of radiation coming from space now, it is thought that the atmosphere did once act as a better shield, and that the environment of Mars may have once been a great host for life, which is exactly why this mission is so important. While when the anonymous video was first released, we were still a ways away from the Perseverance mission taking place, it's really cool to see how it has come to fruition, and it's exciting to see the new photos and discoveries that are made each day. In our number 4 spot today we have UFO footage, part 2. We have to include just one more video of what is claimed to be proof of aliens visiting us on Earth before we get back into the more science-y top 3 points. This is another video that was uploaded by a member of Anonymous, and it comes from 2017. The video features a dark sky, but it shows what looks like some sort of aircraft with a few flashing lights, and it seems like it is able to basically just hover there. Not long after the video starts, another mysterious UFO seemingly joins the first one, and the two are just seen floating there. What do you guys think these could be? I obviously don't know what an alien aircraft would look like, so it's tough to say if this is a realistic example or not. All I know is that if this isn't someone playing a trick and they really saw this in the sky, I have no other possible explanations of what it could be. In our number 3 spot today we have TRAPPIST-1. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. One of the things Anonymous mentioned in the video was a nearby star called TRAPPIST-1. The video didn't go into too much detail about this, but I'm here to do that now so we can all know what they were talking about. While TRAPPIST-1 is a star, the revelation that the video spoke about was that this star has an entire solar system of Earth-like planets. This discovery first came in 2017, and upon further research, in 2018 it was revealed that some of the planets just may harbor even more water than Earth does. Some of the planets are a little too close to the star, so the water is more atmospheric water vapor. The ones in the middle have liquid water, like us, and the furthest ones have ice. TRAPPIST-1 is now the most thoroughly known planetary system apart from ours, which is kinda cool. While the Anonymous video made it seem like there was a full-blown advanced alien civilization living in this solar system, there still might be potential for some form of microbial life that we just haven't quite found yet. And that is very cool. In our number 2 spot today we have Enceladus. If you had heard of Enceladus before the Anonymous video, there's a good chance you knew it as basically an icy snowball floating around in space, or perhaps you simply knew it as a small moon of Saturn with a diameter of 502 kilometers, but as it turns out, this small moon might hold some pretty amazing potential. It was discovered that this moon has hydrothermal processes going on underneath its crust. To us non-scientists that means next to nothing, but what if I said that means that it just might have all of the requirements for life, and that it is becoming a greater possibility that we might find microbial life there. Basically, this moon has an icy shell for a surface and then a rocky interior, but between those two layers is a warm ocean, and this ocean is where scientists think the life is most likely to be. This discovery came almost accidentally when the Cassini orbiter arrived to Saturn in 2005, and it found water plumes shooting out of the cracks in the surface of the moon, which made scientists realize that it just may be geologically active. Through more research and by flying the orbiter through the water, by the time 2015 rolled around, scientists knew that it was holding all of the keys to life. While this little moon was never the original focus of research, it quickly took over with its incredibly exciting potential. In our number 1 spot today we have Europa. We've got another moon to talk about that was mentioned in the video that also just might be holding the keys to us finding alien life, but this time we're taking it over to Jupiter Jupiter and its icy moon, Europa. Europa has been a point of interest for a while after NASA's Galileo Jupiter probe in the 1990s revealed an unusually warm spot in Europa's cold surface. In March of 2014, the Hubble telescope detected what scientists thought might be a plume of water vapor, but the caution turned to cautious excitement and optimism in February of 2016 when the telescope caught another, much larger plume in the same spot. This has led to the creation of the Europa Clipper mission. While this mission doesn't yet have a set date, it will see an orbiter flying to Europa to fly through these plumes in an attempt to see what they are made out of, similar to the one we just talked about, to see if it really is holding the key to life, or maybe even life itself. One of the scientists on the Clipper mission, Robert Pappalardo, explained that if there is life on Europa, it almost certainly was completely independent from the origin of life on Earth. That would mean the origin of life must be pretty easy throughout the galaxy and beyond.
The first image is a screen grab from a video filmed by a US Marine officer on the 20th of April in 2021 on a military base in 29 Palms, California. After the release of the photograph, multiple Marines came forward to confirm the existence of an aircraft, saying that while the photo showcases only the triangle-shaped formation of bright lights, in person the men were able to make out the black body of the aircraft as well. The unidentified flying object is said to have hovered for 10 minutes in the air before it suddenly vanished without any trace. The men were able to rule out flares for being the cause of the mysterious lights, but were never able to figure out exactly what they saw that night. However, it appears the footage has not been taken lightly, as the Pentagon has started an investigation into just what exactly was seen on the night of April 20th of 2021 in the skies above the 29 Palms military base. Next up, we have a series of photographs taken by cosmonaut Ivan Vanger in August of 2020 whilst aboard the International Space Station that appears to depict 5 unidentified flying objects flying at the same speed while maintaining the same distance between each other as well as their surroundings, moving in a straight line just above the Earth's curved horizon visible in the night sky. Vangar, both surprised and curious, took to Twitter, now named X, to share the footage in hopes of getting some clarity as to exactly what he was looking at. In an exciting unfolding of events, his tweet was picked up by the Russian space agency Roscosmos, and a spokesperson revealed that experts were in fact studying the video in an attempt to determine what exactly Vangar had managed to capture. Did you guys know that Japan was a major hotbed for UFO activity? Because I didn't. But apparently the Pentagon does? In fact, UFO sightings are so common in Japan that its military has reportedly ordered all pilots to disclose any and all identified flying objects directly to the Japanese government. Not only that, but Japanese self-defense forces have also undergone extensive training in relation to UFO sighting protocol. To date, 6 alleged encounters between pilots and UFOs have been reported to the Japanese government, one of which was recorded, and depicts 10 white circular balls flying through the skies of Osaka in Japan. While the government has yet to publicly comment on any of the incidents, the update of self-defense protocol alone is pretty telling. The next image was shared by a pretty reputable source, National Geographic. The image was captured by Sergio Loaiza on September 4th of 1971 during an aerial survey of Lake Cote. Everything seemed pretty normal until the photos were taken back to Loaiza's development lab, where he noticed something very strange. A metallic flying aircraft, estimated to have a diameter of 160 feet, was located in the corner of one of the photographs. When he presented the photos to his superiors at the National Geographic Institute, they shut him down quick, forbidding Sergio as well as his colleagues from sharing any information of what they had seen that day. In 1979, however, the photograph was leaked, and the object that appeared in the image was officially classified as an unidentified flying object. In 2021, the existence of the object was again confirmed after the original copy of the photograph was scanned, and it was revealed that the UFO's presence was more than just a scratch on the lens or a piece of dust in the wind. So what do you think it was? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we have footage that comes to us straight from the declassifieds. Remember how I told you at the beginning of the video that the government quite literally copped to the fact that they have been hiding the existence of UFOs for years? Well, they did, and they came with receipts. On the 15th of January in 2023, while surveilling an MQ-9 Reaper aircraft, an unidentified aerial presence was captured moving at speeds unreachable by any of Earth's modern-day technological advances. Not only this, but as the object whizzed through the field of view of the camera lens, it appeared to leave behind an atmospheric wake before disappearing completely into the sky. Guys, if you have any, please leave your UFO and alien stories in the comments. I would love to hear about your experiences with any of these kind of things. Next up, we have arguably the most beautiful alien-assuming photograph I have ever seen. The photo was taken in 2004 by a retired Royal Air Force officer while on vacation in Sri Lanka. The sight was described as some kind of colorful giant donut in the sky with hues of oranges, pinks, purples, and whites. After its capture, the photograph was turned into the Royal Air Force Flying Dales base in North Yorkshire in England, where it became a classified document held by the Ministry of Defense. The image has since been declassified, of course, and is now available for public viewing, but there is still a lot of mystery surrounding the photo as well as the photographer, as his identity, along with any other information regarding the incident, is pretty much non-existent. I mean, come on, it's a giant glowing light in the sky. You're really telling me no one else saw this and that there's no other information out there other than the fact that the photo exists? Oh, yeah, and not only that, but it was deemed classified by the British Ministry of Defense, so I'm thinking there's something else going on here. Okay, I bet you didn't know that another major hotbed for extraterrestrial, UFO, and unidentified aerial phenomenon activity was Brazil. I mean, I did, but maybe you didn't. In fact, this kind of thing is so popular in Brazil that they have an annual day of recognition for these sightings known as the Night of the UFO, which came to be after a major event took place in 1986. On the night of May 19th, a series of unidentified flying objects were seen in the skies of Brazil, and even more non-visual objects were detected via radar across the skies of 4 Brazilian states. Of course, at this time, any and all knowledge the government had on the event was extremely classified. In May of 2012, however, Brazil's Freedom of Information Act went into place, after which the public demanded the release of all the documents relating to the incident. The government complied, and not only released written documents of the events, but also a series of photographs depicting strange activity within the skies above Brazil. Although the images of what appeared to be nothing more than squiggles and clouds of smoke didn't provide much clarity, a statement made by the Minister of Aeronautics did. He said, "This command is of the opinion that the phenomena are solid and reflect, in a certain way, intelligence, due to the ability to follow and maintain a distance from observers, as well as to fly information." After this statement was made, the Brazilian government has still not been able to confirm exactly what took place the day the Night of the UFOs was born. Next, we have a photo taken in 1990 by 2 Scottish chefs who were working in a hotel near the area in which the photograph was taken. After a long day of work, it appears the 2 men had decided to take a hike in an attempt to blow off some steam. While this walk wouldn't end up being incredibly relaxing, it would be wildly exciting, as not long after the 2 men had set off on their journey along the Calvine Scottish countryside, they noticed something hovering above them in the sky. The object was not one that either of the men could identify, and so they pulled out their cameras in an attempt to document the 100-foot flying aircraft instead. The photos, which have been analyzed and show no signs of manipulation, captured the object being circled by a jet plane. They thought the incident was incredibly strange and even newsworthy, so the 2 turned the footage over to the local newspaper for publication, but the images were seized by the British Ministry of Defense and were never released. Until 32 years later, that is, by David Clark, who, unbeknownst to the ministry, had kept a photocopy of one of the original images. The identity of the 2 men was never revealed, nor did they ever come forward to share their story after the images had been seized by the ministry, begging the question of what exactly they saw and what exactly the government was trying to cover up. A photograph taken of an unidentified aircraft lit up by military spotlights in Los Angeles, California, is next on the list. The photograph, which documents an event so big it later became referred to as the Battle of Los Angeles or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, was taken on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. On the night the photo was taken, all of Los Angeles was under blackout, as directed by the US military. While the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above had been lit up by a myriad of strange objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers stood absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition appeared to have no effect on the unidentified flying object. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. Furthermore, 3 were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. And finally, we have a handful of screen grabs from a video taken by Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich whilst flying an 18F Super Hornet fighter jet over the Pacific Ocean near San Diego during a training mission for the United States Navy. The footage, taken in November of 2004, was captured after Dietrich was asked to investigate a suspicious object that had been seen dropping from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean and then vanishing. When Alex and their colleague arrived on the scene, the ocean's surface, where the object had been reported, appeared as though it was boiling. Moments after arriving to investigate, a strange, elongated white object came into view and was captured on video hovering above the water before it disappeared into the sky at an impossible speed, leaving no wake in the oceans below. While the footage has been confirmed to be authentic by the United States Department of Defense, the object itself, along with its origins, remains a mystery.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Lake Huron UFO. Just this past weekend, on Sunday, February 12th, US officials were able to confirm that the Air Force and the National Guard had downed a UFO that was seen over Lake Huron, which has a shoreline that is shared by the US state Michigan as well as the Canadian province of Ontario, where I am right now. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, a Michigan Democrat, not only confirmed the downing, but also took to Twitter to write, quote, "Great work by all who carried out this mission both in the air and back at headquarters. We're all interested in exactly what this object was and its purpose." Of course, this only worked to fuel rumors over what exactly this UFO could actually be or where it came from. The Department of Defense is said to have been tracking the flying object for some time before it decided that action needed to be taken in order to get the object out of airspace. So far, while there still hasn't been any confirmations of what exactly this object was, it has been described as a, quote, octagonal structure. Right now, recovery efforts of the debris is underway, but as of filming this, there have been no official reports of what exactly this UFO might have been or where it came from. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Yukon UFO. On Saturday, February 11th, just a day before the Lake Huron UFO, a US fighter jet shot down this unidentified flying object that was in the skies above Yukon, a Canadian territory. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took to Twitter to let Canadians know that he had ordered the, quote, takedown of an unidentified object that violated Canadian airspace. In an effort to take down the UFO, both Canadian and US aircrafts were scrambled, and Air Force members took to the sky to execute the successful downing of the object. Canadian forces are now working to recover and analyze the wreckage of this UFO to hopefully identify its origin. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD, had initially detected the object flying at a high altitude over Alaska on Friday evening, and on Saturday is when it crossed into Canadian airspace. Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder explained that, quote, a US F-22 shot down the object in Canadian territory using an AIM-9X missile following close coordination between US and Canadian authorities. Both Canadians and Americans are on high alert with this UFO, considering it is just one of the many that have been taken out of airspace in the last couple weeks alone. Like I mentioned before, right now the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are working on recovering the wreckage, but the FBI will also be working closely with the RCMP during the investigation. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Alaska UFO. Okay, we're doing like a reverse timeline for these few points because now we are talking about the Alaska UFO that was shot down one day before the Yukon UFO. It was like Alaska, Yukon, Lake Huron. On February 10th, an F-22 US fighter jet shot down an unidentified object over the waters near Alaska. The object was said to have been caught flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and was deemed a, quote, reasonable threat to aviation, which is why the orders were given to take it down. The object was first detected the day before, and a flyby happened on the Thursday it was seen, before the second flyby and takedown which took place on the Friday. Here's where things get really suspicious though. The pilots who were sent up to investigate and take down the UFO all gave differing reports of what it was that they saw. Some of the pilots even say that the UFO interfered with their sensors, and others claimed that they couldn't see any kind of propulsion system on the object, which poses the question, how could it have possibly been just casually cruising 40,000 feet in the air? In a statement over the weekend, the US Northern Command said that they have no new information about the object's quote capabilities, purpose, or origin, and they also explained that the recovery efforts are being slowed down by the icy conditions in the region. The National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, said of the object, quote, "We're calling this an object because that's the best description we have right now." He continued to say, quote, "We don't know who owns it, whether it's state-owned or corporate-owned or privately owned, we just don't know." People are especially concerned about this UFO in particular because of the important military sites in Alaska, as well as its very close proximity to its neighboring countries. In our number 7 spot today, we have the balloon. On February 4th, it became public knowledge that officials were monitoring a strange object in the sky that they claimed had entered airspace above Alaska on January 28th. They monitored the object as it later drifted from Idaho southeast to the Carolinas before the decision was made to take it down. This operation was carried out and the object was shot down. As it turns out, this object was realized to be some kind of a balloon. The balloon is said to have been about the size of 3 buses, and it was flying at an altitude of around 60,000 to 65,000 feet. Authorities were able to discover that the origin of this object was from China, but there are conflicting accounts of what its purpose might have been. China has maintained that the device was a civilian aircraft that strayed into American airspace, but senior American officials are seemingly believing that the balloon was originally supposed to conduct surveillance. Many believe that the spying was to be done over US military bases in Guam and Hawaii, but winds carried it off course to Alaska, Canada, and finally the United States mainland, where it was then shot down. Whatever this balloon was for, I'm just glad that we know what this one was and where it had come from, because some of these other recent UFOs are just too mysterious. In our number 6 spot today, we have the classified report. We are just scratching the surface of our time in 2023, but already there were some crazy announcements, including one regarding a report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there has been a total of 510 quote unidentified aerial phenomena observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing, what we as the public know is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual real secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise, one day we'll find out. In our number 5 spot today, we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over the top of us." Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or Navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of those stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here. In our number 4 spot today, we have the 2023 sighting. This UFO video was taken recently on January 22nd, and the video was posted to Reddit by a user called MaxKeller96, and with the video, they gave some context. Quote, "My sister, dad, and I were out hiking near Picket Post when one of us noticed something glimmering near the mountain, so we stopped to look at it. All I could really make out is that it was a small bright dot in the sky. After a good 15 seconds of staring at it, just silently hanging in the air, trying to figure out what the was, I started recording. Sorry it's shaky, I could barely see my phone screen and was trying to get a good look at it with my own eyes. It then dropped 2 flare-looking things, though my sister swears she counted at least 3, and then it instantly sped off, heading south-ish. Up until that point, I thought it might have been a helicopter or a drone, as there's a lot of military/Air Force base stuff out here, but there's no way anything can accelerate that fast. We all lost sight of it nearly instantly after video cuts, and we were all properly freaked out about it. I've replayed the video probably 100 times and tried showing it to everyone I know, and no one had any idea what it could be other than a super high-end drone. If you think you know, please let me know. After watching the video also probably 100 times, I can definitely say that I have no idea what they all saw that day, because I also really don't think it was a drone. I also have to say that this video even gathered people together on Reddit, and that is no easy feat. Redditors are ruthless, and often very skeptical, and still people are pretty on board and confused over what this could have been. In our number 3 spot today, we have the USS Princeton UFO. This UFO sighting comes from 2004, but footage of it was released in 2017. On November 14th of 2004, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 went over in 2 fighter jets in order to kind of scope out the situation, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it, like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust, which is especially peculiar when we think of what the pilots who just shot down the Alaska UFO said. No propulsion, right? Gives me chills just thinking about it, because how could that be possible? The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. Like, when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. Faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what this was, because it definitely seems like we don't have the technology to make this sort of thing possible. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Chicago UFO. This UFO sighting comes from November 7th, 2006, and it was at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Flight 446 was getting ready to head to North Carolina when an employee from United Airlines that was on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic aircraft hovering over one of the gates. After this, 11 other employees and even a few people who didn't work there saw this gray saucer floating at around 4:15 p.m. The people who saw it explained that it hovered above the gate for about 5 minutes before it just shot itself upwards and broke through the clouds, leaving a hole in the clouds where you could see the blue sky through. The strangest thing, however, is that this flying saucer did not show up on the radar, so the Federal Aviation Administration just called it a weather phenomena and would not investigate it, despite there being around 15 witnesses who all saw exactly the same thing. This story did, however, become one of the most read stories on the Chicago Tribune's website, and even went international because it certainly is very interesting. And finally, in our number 1 spot, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form 2 parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half a mile wide. Craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to the US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for the human civilization.
Starting off this countdown, we have the alien abduction. Back in 1956, an American Air Force Sergeant, Jonathan P. Lovett, and Major William Cunningham went out searching for debris from a recent missile launch in New Mexico. That's when Cunningham heard Lovett let out a huge scream. When he rushed over to help him, he claims he saw Lovett being pulled up by a UFO hovering above him. Lovett was then pulled inside the craft and it took off. Cunningham radioed for help, and when they arrived, they found him in complete shock and he was taken to the hospital. They then started to investigate the incident. According to the military, there was an unidentified object in that area detected on their radar, so Cunningham was telling the truth. Here's where it gets even more messed up though. 3 days later, Lovett's body was found 10 miles away. It was severely mutilated and drained completely of blood. So could it be that he literally was taken away by aliens and then killed by them? What makes this even more suspicious is that the government report on this just vanished into thin air. In our 9th spot, we have the Gorman dogfight UFO. This is said to be one of the most well-known UFO encounters from the 20th century. It's also a fairly credible one. So on October 1st, 1948, US Air Force pilot George Gorman was out flying when he spotted a UFO below him. He described it as a flying disc with round and well-defined edges that was brightly lit and circling slowly over the city. What was weird was that the object was not showing up on radar. So Gorman decided to follow it, but as he got closer to the object, it got brighter and then it shot away from him. He said it went around 250 miles per hour, then increased to 600 miles an hour. Due to its speed, Gorman lost sight of it. Now the government was all like, it's just a weather balloon. Yeah right, I think an experienced aviator would know the difference between a weather balloon and a flying saucer. In our 8th spot, we have the Pentagon. Last year, the Pentagon released footage of what they confirmed to be a UFO. I'm pretty sure by now you have all seen this video, but if you haven't, I'll share it with you today. So the UFO was captured on camera by 2 naval aviators who were shocked at what they saw.
There's a whole fleet of them, look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
So in the videos you can see what appears to be a UFO flying in the sky. In the video you can hear just how shocked the pilots are at what they're seeing.
Look at that thing, dude.
In fact, one of the pilots that witnessed this told CNN that the disc moved in ways he couldn't explain. Apparently, 1 second it was there and then next thing you know it disappeared. He said, and I quote, "As I got close to it, it rapidly accelerated to the south and then disappeared in less than 2 seconds. This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. It would hit and go the other way." Moving on to number 7, we have the Top Cliff UFO. On September 19th in 1952, half a dozen Royal Air Force officers were taking part of NATO exercises when they encountered a UFO. So the men were headed back in their fighter jet when crew members on the ground saw a weird, silvery, circular object traveling several thousands of feet above the jet. One of the witnesses said, and I quote, "The acceleration was in excess of that of a shooting star. I have never seen such a phenomenon before. The movements of the object were not identifiable with anything I have seen in the air." The craft then started to descend close to the fighter jet. They said it was, and I quote, "swinging in a pendular motion, similar to a falling sycamore leaf." At first, they thought it was a parachute or something that had fallen off of the jet. That was until it stopped midair, began to spin, and then just zoomed away. This sighting was then leaked to the press and was the front cover of the newspapers for quite some time. In fact, this sighting was so insane that Prime Minister Winston Churchill wanted to know more about it and get an investigation going. In our 6th spot, we have the destroyed evidence. On the morning of July 24th, 1948, 2 pilots were flying from Houston to Atlanta with their 20 passengers. That's when all of a sudden they saw a UFO flying clear as day by them. This was witnessed by the 2 pilots and 1 of the passengers. The others were asleep when this happened. One of the pilots said, and I quote, "It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power, shooting flame from the rear some 50 feet. There were 2 rows of windows which indicated an upper and lower deck, and from inside these windows a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship there was a blue glow of light." Now they all watched this for about 10 seconds until it disappeared. Obviously, they reported their findings, and this triggered a top secret investigation by the US government. In the end, their findings were destroyed, which means this could be a real UFO sighting, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't have destroyed the evidence. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the White House UFO. Back in the 1940s and 50s, there were a number of UFO sightings in the skies over Washington, D.C. It all started back in 1947 when a search and rescue pilot reported 9 saucer-like discs flying together at over 1,000 miles per hour. Within weeks, the same flying saucer sighting was reported in 40 other states. The strangest incident happened to an air traffic controller in 1952. On July 19th, Edward Nugent, working as an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport, spotted 7 slow-moving objects on his radar. They were located far from any of their flight paths. Now, he made a joke being like, "Oh look, they're flying saucers," until he realized that that's probably what they actually were. At that same time, 2 more air traffic controllers saw a strange hovering bright light in the distance. Now, they did send out jets to the area, but as soon as they got to the area where the objects were on the radar, they disappeared. Over the next couple of weeks, more and more UFOs were spotted. It got to the point where people were demanding answers. In our 4th spot, we have Britain's Roswell. This is said to be the UK's most famous UFO incident. So in December of 1980 in Rendlesham Forest, England, a number of people reported seeing unexplained lights and then a weird spacecraft land. It all started on December 26 when a security man saw strange lights descend into the forest. As he approached this object, it moved through the trees and the animals at a farm nearby went crazy. The following days, more and more people saw these lights. In fact, a number of credible US Air Force officials were witnesses to this account, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. The lieutenant himself confirmed it to be a UFO. In our 3rd spot, we have the 6 soldiers. This next UFO encounter took place in North Korea in 1951 during the Korean War. As the men were preparing to bombard a nearby village, they were all of a sudden greeted by a strange craft. The craft emitted some form of ray that made their air burst start to explode. According to one of the men, and I quote, "Objects would get right into the center of an airburst of artillery and yet remain unharmed." They also said that they were, and I quote, "swept by some form of a ray that was emitted in pulses, in waves that you could visually see only when it was aiming directly at you." That is to say, like a searchlight sweeps around and the segments of light, you would see it coming at you. After this weird attack, the men were left sick and had to be taken to the hospital. Some say that they were attacked by a UFO. Others say they were attacked by a high-tech Soviet death ray. To this day, we still don't know. Moving on to number 2, we have the Mantell UFO incident. Named after Captain Thomas F. Mantell, a Kentucky Air National Guard pilot who sadly lost his life chasing a UFO. So on January 7th, 1948, Godman Army Airfield at Fort Knox received a report of a weird aerial object near Madisonville, Kentucky. They claim it was a floating circular object around 250 to 300 feet in diameter. So the US Air Force sent Thomas to investigate. Sadly, while doing so, he crashed his plane and lost his life. Now, Thomas was a very experienced pilot. He had spent around 2,167 hours in the air, so it's not like him to just crash like that. Other people that saw the UFO claimed it was very white with red borders at the bottom. Some even said, and I quote, "Just before leaving it came to very near the ground, staying down for about 10 seconds, then climbed at a very fast rate back to its original altitude, 10,000 feet, leveling off and disappearing into the overcast, heading 120 degrees. Its speed was greater than 100 miles per hour in level flight." And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Roswell UFO. This is said to be the most famous UFO case in America. So it takes place during the summer of 1947. A rancher named W.W. MacBrazel said he found wreckage on his big plot of land. In fact, during that time, there was a number of UFO sightings, so the rancher thought that the wreckage was from a UFO crash. So he brought that material to the sheriff, who brought it to an officer from the US Army Air Force. Later, the US Army announced that what the rancher found was a flying disc. But the following day, the US Army quickly reversed themselves, and they were like, no, it's not a UFO, it's actually just debris from a weather balloon. Years later, in 1994, they admitted that the weather balloon story had been completely bogus. Over the years, hundreds of UFO sightings have been reported in that area. Several eyewitnesses also claimed that they saw alien bodies being taken from a government test site. But the government was like, nah, those are just
Test dummies. Yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know, there's a number of conspiracy theories surrounding Roswell. It seems like the government might be hiding aliens there.
And we're going to start things off with the latest buzz in extraterrestrial news, the mysterious bodies of supposed mummified aliens that were displayed in front of the Mexican Congress. Jamie Maussan, a journalist and UFOologist, presented these fossilized bodies to the politicians, claiming that they're over 1,000 years old. He testified under oath saying, quote, "These specimens are not part of the evolution of our world. They were not recovered from a UFO scrap. They were found fossilized in a diatom moss mine." So this is the first public congressional hearing on UFOs in Mexico, which is pretty cool. But I gotta say, these alien bodies look a little suspect. They're kind of cute. If this is what our standard grays really look like, that would be a pleasant surprise. They've always been reported as being short and scrawny, but these things look like they're almost doll-sized. Anyway, I hope this is legit, but what do you think? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we have a UFO hovering over Mexico City. This video is taken in 2015 and shows what appears to be some kind of mysterious object hovering in the air. Pretty good video because we get a good long look at the object, and it definitely looks odd. Strange shape to it. It's been described as beetle-like, which I can definitely see. The video was sent to Scott Waring, a self-proclaimed UFO expert. He's come up a couple times in my previous videos. Anyway, he thought the clip was legit enough to share on his YouTube channel. This could be a drone, but again, what do you all think? Next on the list, we have the 1991 Eclipse UFO sighting. This was a pretty big case at the time, probably one of the most famous UFO sightings in Mexico. During the 1991 solar eclipse, there was a big celebration in Mexico City, and many took to videotaping the sky to document being thrust into sudden darkness in the middle of the day. But on some of these tapes, folks managed to capture something they weren't expecting to see. A mysterious silver disc-shaped object hovering through the sky. A television executive named Guillermo Aragon took the most well-known piece of footage and sent the tape to, again, Jamie Maussan, the same guy we brought up before with those alien bodies. This guy's been in the UFO scene for a very long time. Anyway, the footage was released to the public, and the TV station was flooded with phone calls with people claiming to have seen the object, and more tapes started getting sent in, some of which showed that same strange disc-like object. At number 7, we have the Mexican Air Force sighting. On March 5th, 2004, several Mexican Air Force pilots filmed a series of strange, glowing, unidentified flying objects, 11 in total, hovering in the skies over southern Campeche state. The pilots were on routine anti-drone trafficking vigilance when they spotted the strange objects which they reported surrounding their jet. They attempted to pursue the objects, but eventually they disappeared out of sight. Gotta say, this is a pretty compelling piece of footage. Even though the video quality isn't great, you get to observe these objects for a long time. It's not like they just appeared and flew away in the blink of an eye. Plus, I always find it interesting when pilots who spend a great deal of time flying in the air observe things like this and have no explanation for what it is. Number 6, Carlos de los Santos sighting. Carlos de los Santos is a retired pilot who experienced a terrifying encounter with 3 disc-shaped UFOs in 1975. He was on a flight back to Mexico City in his Piper 24 Comanche. There was nothing wrong with the plane, weather conditions were good, and he was about an hour into the flight when suddenly he spotted something on his right wing. It was a silver disc-like object, about 13 feet long. He was incredibly startled and confused by this, and to make matters worse, it wasn't long until he spotted an identical object on his left wing. And then a third object appeared, this time hurling towards him from the front of the plane, and it just missed him. And it was at this point that Carlos lost control of the plane altogether. He tried to move the control wheel, but the plane wouldn't respond. He made a frantic call to air traffic control saying he had lost control of his aircraft and that he was surrounded by UFOs before suddenly his plane completely changed course. The plane started to ascend, climbing higher and higher into the sky. He basically thought he was going to die. just when he'd started to accept his fate and that there was no way he was going to get out of this situation, the strange objects flew away from his aircraft and he found that the controls were suddenly working again. At number 5, we have the Popocatépetl volcano. I could fill up an entire list with the UFO sightings spotted in this one area alone. It's not only one of the most active volcanoes in the country, but it seems to be one of the biggest hotbeds of unidentified flying objects as well. UFO sightings around the volcano have raised eyebrows and sparked curiosity among locals and researchers. Witnesses describe seeing strange, unidentified flying objects near the volcano, often displaying unconventional flight patterns and characteristics. The sightings have been documented by multiple sources too, including photographs, videos. One of the factors contributing to the frequent UFO sightings near the volcano is its geographic location. The volcano stands at an elevation of over 17,000 feet and is situated in a region known for seismic and volcanic activity. Some speculate that these conditions might attract extraterrestrial, intersect, or create unusual atmospheric phenomena that lead to the sightings. Reports of UFOs around the volcano have also drawn the attention of researchers and organizations dedicated to studying unidentified aerial phenomenon. These groups aim to collect data and analyze eyewitness accounts and investigate the nature of these sightings. Now, I think some of these sightings can obviously be attributed to natural phenomenon or aircraft, but there are others that remain unexplained. Next on the list is the luminous UFO. Just at the end of July this year, in a town called Tamaulipas in northeastern Mexico, this strange glowing object was seen hovering in the sky. It's hard to really call it an object though. Kind of just looks like light. Maybe there's an object projecting the light. It's just obscured by clouds or haze, and this is just the lights from the aircraft piercing through. Anyway, the clip was shared to TikTok by user Marcela Guzman, and it's kind of beautiful actually, almost like a jellyfish floating through the sky. Number 3, the Las Lomas UFO. This next piece of footage was taken in 1997. As you could probably tell by the tasty VHS grainy quality, it was taken in the Las Lomas neighborhood in Mexico City. Pretty obvious what's going on in this video. You see what looks like your classic B-movie disc-shaped UFO floating through the sky as our cameraman films on with audible shock and confusion. The object seems to be quite wobbly too, which leads a lot of commenters to say it looks like it's being held up with a string. There are other less skeptical viewers though who speculate that maybe there was something wrong with the vessel, which would help explain why it was flying so low in the first place as well. It's actually a pretty fascinating video because while the wobbliness of this supposed alien vessel does make it look less convincing, it does appear to be floating in the distance. It doesn't look like some kind of camera trick. And in terms of faking something like this with computer generated effects, that was much more difficult to pull off in 1997, especially for your average everyday person. Next, we have a story from Reddit that I'm going to call Consumed by Light. It was posted by Space Chainsaw 810 and goes like this. Not my story, but my wife's middle school teacher in Mexico. The teacher was with a group of her 3 friends driving from, I believe, Tijuana to Mexicali. To get there, they passed through a very curvy downhill grade called La Rumorosa, and the surrounding terrain is rocky cliffs and desert as they descend. They start to descend and see a very bright light coming towards them. They think it's a semi-truck with their high beams on, but the light gets brighter and brighter until it consumes them. They all wake up hours later at the bottom of the grade on the side of the road, unharmed, but they all had a strange needle mark on their upper forearms. Finally, we have Mayan artifacts. There's this theory that's floated around for years that the Mayans were visited by extraterrestrials thousands of years ago, possibly aiding them in constructing the brilliant architecture that they had. Many Mayan artifacts came to public attention in 2012 following the Mexican government's disclosure that they had been kept hidden for approximately 80 years. Some of these artifacts feature carvings and drawings that bear pretty striking resemblance to flying saucers and small beings with large eyes. Speculations about whether the Mayans had actual contact with aliens became a pretty talked about thing at the time, and certainly the Mayans were known for their remarkable artistry, but some of these pieces were just a little too strange. For instance, one artifact is a sarcophagus lid portraying an individual seemingly enclosed within a capsule resembling a spaceship. Another piece is the palanque slab, depicting a figure seated in what closely resembles a cockpit adorned with numerous knobs and buttons. So, did the Mayans encounter something of extraterrestrial origin, and these artifacts were their means of documenting those encounters? There are quite a few similarities between the designs found on some of these ancient artifacts and the depictions of modern UFO sightings and spacecraft designs.
Create a video using exactly this script. Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about megalodon attacks that will never make you want to swim in water again. Click the video now to find out more. See you in the next video.